WWE Bragging Rights 2010 pay-per-view review. The pay-per-view just went off there. As what I gotta say for this pay-per-view is that it was pretty much an uneventful pay-per-view. It was pretty much a throwaway pay-per-view from WWE. Now, I wasn't expecting anything great from this, but I was expecting maybe if some other things or some things with this pay-per-view would have been a little better. Maybe it would have been an average pay-per-view, but that was at the best I was expecting from this pay-per-view. I wasn't expecting anything great. Pretty much a throwaway pay-per-view and pretty much a weak pay-per-view, especially when you really only have two standout matches on this pay-per-view, which are the Raw versus SmackDown Elimination 7-on-7 match and Daniel Bryan versus Dolph Ziggler. And both of those matches were pretty solid. They were enjoyable for what they were, but neither one was anything great or anything that's going to be memorable. So it's pretty much a pay-per-view where no one's going to remember anything from it. They did do a pretty good job throughout the night where they made you think Wade Barrett and the Nexus were going to walk out with the World Heavyweight title, because they did one thing where John Cena and David Otunga won the tag team titles, and then the Nexus got involved in the Buried Alive match, costing Undertaker that. And then in the main event, you were thinking possibly, Wade Barrett was going to walk out as champion, but then the main event ended in a disqualification, but it kind of at least made some sense and logic behind it, since the reasoning behind it was if Wade Barrett lost the match and didn't win the match, John Cena would be fired from WWE. And since John Cena came in there and hit the attitude adjustment on Wade Barrett won the match via disqualification. So it had logic to it. I just don't think it should have been a main event. If they were going to book that type of main event and book it that certain way, that shouldn't have been the main event. And I thought the 7-on-7 match, since that's been the main focus on Monday Night Raw, for the most part, even though the John Cena, the whole Nexus thing is another main focus on Raw, the main focus leading into this, as far as the main booking and going into this pay-per-view, was the 7-on-7 match, and that should have been the main event, considering you did the DQ finish in the main event. Not a good way to end the pay-per-view. But the first matchup was Dolph Ziggler versus Daniel Bryan. This is United States Champion versus Intercontinental Champion. And this was a pretty decent way to start the pay-per-view. Saw some good back-and-forth action. Good action with both of these. This was a fun way to start the pay-per-view. Wasn't a great match, but it was good for what it was. Daniel Bryan won this match after Dolph Ziggler tapped out of the LaBelle Lock in a 3 1/4-star match. Like I said, pretty fun way to start the pay-per-view. Then the next matchup was a match that just got added at the last minute. This was Drew McIntyre and Cody Rhodes, Dashing Cody Rhodes, coming out here saying that they want to defend their tag team titles tonight, and they're saying they pretty much have went through the whole entire ranks in the tag team division in WWE. And then Michael Cole, the GM thing, the anonymous GM, the email comes through and saying that they got an opponent, and their opponent's going to be Wade Barrett comes out here, announces it's going to be David Otunga and John Cena. So John Cena and David Otunga are teaming up to take on Dashing Cody Rhodes and Drew McIntyre. And mainly the best thing about this match was probably the interaction you saw between Drew McIntyre and John Cena. They actually seemed like they could have pretty good chemistry with each other. Cody Rhodes did decent in there for what he was. David Otunga is one guy I really could care less about. And John Cena and David Otunga won this match after John Cena puts Cody Rhodes into the STFU. Cody Rhodes taps out, so John Cena and David Otunga are the tag team champions. David Otunga grabs the both belts. He's celebrating. John Cena is looking frustrated. Then he hits the attitude adjustment on him, walks out with both belts. So that leads to what's going to happen on later on in the evening. Since he did that to David Otunga, what's John Cena and Wade Barrett's interaction going to be later on? That's what they did right there. For the match, for what it was, maybe 1 3/4 star, maybe a 2-star match. You saw some okay stuff, and it was watchable. For a match that just got added at the last minute. The next matchup was something else they added at the last minute, which was Ted DiBiase versus Goldust. And this was wasn't a good wrestling match, and in-ring standpoint, it wasn't that good. But I would say it was kind of like one of those matches where it wasn't a good wrestling standpoint match, but it was entertaining for what it was. For something they just threw on pretty much to cut time on the pay-per-view, it was okay for what it was. It wasn't like god-awful, and it wasn't something that I would say was one of the worst things I've ever seen. So it was okay and some good entertainment in it. DiBiase wins the match after hitting a DDT on Goldust, and I would say about a 1 3/4 star match. Like I said, it wasn't a good wrestling match, but it was okay, enjoyable, kind of somewhat comical match that they just added at the last minute right there. Then the next matchup was Layla versus Natalya for the Divas Championship. And this was just a typical Divas match, nothing really special here. The only thing I like about the last two Divas matches, or the only thing good right now in the Divas division in WWE, is they're finally starting to showcase Natalya. That's the one good thing right here. Layla ends up winning this match, so Layla and Michelle McCool are still the co-Divas champion, and like I said, pretty typical Divas match, nothing really special in it. 1 star at best. Then the next matchup was Undertaker versus Kane in a Buried Alive match for the World Heavyweight Championship. And this was, I would say, it was a little more enjoyable than probably their Hell in the Cell match, but it wasn't much of anything. It's kind of like something we've seen with these two, a rehash of old stuff they'd done 13 years ago. Now, they never had a Buried Alive match, but it's just the same thing. They were just brawling all over the arena, stuff like that. Pretty much what you kind of saw in the Hell in a Cell with them brawling around the ring and all that, and the match you saw the month previous, and they were brawling around the arena and all that. And then towards the end of the match, you saw Undertaker. He was not Undertaker. He was at the top where they had the tombstone for the Buried Alive match, and you saw the Nexus members come out there. They attack Undertaker, and that pretty much leads to Undertaker losing the match. With the help of Nexus, Kane wins this match and retains the championship. So it's going to be interesting to see where they lead to this on SmackDown. Obviously, they're probably going to do something where Paul Bearer paid off the Nexus members to come out here and help Kane win this match so he can retain the title. And it's going to be interesting to see what they do with Kane. So, not Kane, but Undertaker. It's going to be interesting to see where they lead to this as well with Undertaker. So, with this, it wasn't a great match. I would say it was at least watchable. 2 stars I probably would give it. But it's going to be interesting to see what they do next. What they're going to do with the involvement with Nexus. Are they going to have them be doing something on SmackDown now as well? And Kane and Undertaker, where their feud's going to lead next. Kind of a little interesting to see where that's going to go to next, though. Then the next matchup was the 7-on-7 match. This was Team Raw versus Team SmackDown, with the captain of Team Raw being The Miz. Their team consisting of The Miz, Sheamus, R-Truth, John Morrison, CM Punk, Ezekiel Jackson, and Santino Marella, versus Team SmackDown, which was Big Show as the captain. Big Show, Edge, Rey Mysterio, Kofi Kingston, Jack Swagger, Alberto Del Rio, and Tyler Rex. Now, this was probably the best match of the night, and that's really not saying much with this as far as, when you're looking in the description box and just me going through this review right now, you really can tell that there was really not many good matches on this pay-per-view. This match in the U.S. versus the Intercontinental Championship non-title match with Dolph Ziggler versus Daniel Bryan. These were really the only 2 good matches on the pay-per-view, and really the only 2 matches that even got above 3 stars in my eyes on this pay-per-view. And this was the first elimination came when Santino got eliminated by Tyler Rex. Then Kofi Kingston got eliminated by Sheamus. Then Swagger got eliminated by Morrison. Then Tyler Rex got eliminated by Sheamus. Tyler Rex stayed in there a whole lot longer than I was expecting. I was expecting him probably to be one of the first ones to get eliminated in this match. Then after that, Show and Sheamus both get counted out. R-Truth then gets eliminated by Edge. Edge then eliminates Morrison as well. He comes in there, is hitting spears, eliminates both of them very quick. And then R-Truth gets eliminated by Edge. Morrison, like I said. Then Alberto Del Rio gets eliminated by CM Punk. Punk gets eliminated by Mysterio. Jackson gets eliminated by Mysterio. Then the last 2 are Edge and Mysterio. Edge and Mysterio are the final 2 on their team, with Miz being on the other side, and Edge and Mysterio win after Edge hits the spear onto The Miz in this match. Pretty fun for what it was. Now, I kind of thought it would have been better if they would have had, The Miz be the survivor member of his team, since he has the Money in the Bank right now. And since they're kind of booking Sheamus pretty good, strong right now, probably would have been smart to have the Raw side go over, especially leading up into this pay-per-view, which I guess this is the one thing they wanted us all to think. Leading into this pay-per-view, SmackDown was built pretty strong, so everyone was like, okay, Raw is definitely going to win this. So 2 years in a row, SmackDown wins this. The 7-on-7 match right here, yet again, the second year of bragging rights. And it was pretty fun for what it was. You saw some good action in there. CM Punk and Rey Mysterio did some good stuff. Edge did some good stuff. It was a pretty fun match for what it was, but it wasn't a great match. I thought it was going to be a little better, but for what it was good, and I would say it was the best match of the night. I'd probably give it 3 1/4, maybe 3.5 stars. For what it was the best match of the night. Then the main event was Wade Barrett versus Randy Orton for the WWE Championship, with John Cena being in the corner of Wade Barrett. And this match, like I said, I already told you how this match ends earlier, and everyone already knows how the match ended. Pretty bad way to end the pay-per-view right here. I thought, it had logic and had reasoning behind it, because obviously going into this, it was if Wade Barrett, if he loses this match, John Cena's fired. So John Cena had to do something and come up with any way for, Wade Barrett to win this match, and at the same time, him not winning the title. So towards the end of the match, you saw all the Nexus members come in there. They all came in there. John Cena got in the ring, started throwing them out, told Wade Barrett, "What are you doing? You need to get them out of here because they can cost you the match and get you DQ'd." Then at the end of the match, John Cena gets in the ring. He's right behind Orton, so you think maybe he's going to do something with Orton. Then he goes over to Wade Barrett, picks Wade Barrett up, hits the attitude adjustment on him. And since he hit it on Wade Barrett wins the match via disqualification. And with that, Randy Orton's still champion, and then they can follow through with, since Wade Barrett won the match and Cena didn't lose the match for him, even though he didn't win the championship, the logic behind this is John Cena pretty much went through with his deal with Wade Barrett, and he doesn't have, I guess he's going to either still be with Nexus or whatnot. I guess we'll have to wait and see what that part does on Monday Night Raw. Pretty bad way to end the pay-per-view with the disqualification like that, even though it had logic behind it. But even though it had reasoning and logic behind it, it shouldn't have been the main event. If they were going to do that, they should have done it earlier. But I guess since they did the thing with John Cena and David Otunga, Nexus kind of pretty much winning the tag belts, then them coming out there, costing Undertaker his Buried Alive match, they probably thought, all the fans are going to think Wade Barrett's going to walk out as champion, so we got to have this as the main event. That was probably what they were thinking, but it didn't go good, and it wasn't a good way to end the pay-per-view. Like I said, they shouldn't have had that be the main event. They should have had the 7-on-7 match, since that was the best match of the night. And like I said, it was kind of the match that was the main thing of the night of the pay-per-view, which was, Raw versus SmackDown, the 7-on-7 elimination match. Probably the match that was pushed the strongest going into this pay-per-view. Should have been the main event. If they would have had Wade Barrett become champion and something like that, or John Cena turn full heel, that would have been something good to have in the main event. But with that type of ending for the pay-per-view, it just left a bad taste in your mouth and wasn't a good way to end the event. Then Randy Orton, he hits the RKO on Wade Barrett after that match and on John Cena. So Orton celebrating after the match with his belt. Not a good way to end the pay-per-view. Match-wise, I'll probably give the main event, since I didn't like the book, and I'll probably give it maybe 1.5 stars, maybe 2 stars for, it was at least watchable for the time it was given, but really nothing good at all other than the 7-on-7 match and the Dolph Ziggler and Daniel Bryan match. Those are really the only two things that stand out in this pay-per-view. Neither one of those was anything really spectacular or great or anything that's going to be memorable. So this was pretty much a very lackluster pay-per-view outing from WWE. So overall, I'd probably give this pay-per-view maybe a 5.5 out of 10, and that might be even generous. I might even give it a 5 out of 10 because it just wasn't a good pay-per-view. I don't think many people are going to be thinking this was a good pay-per-view outing from WWE. Like I said, I'll probably give it 5.5, maybe a 5 out of 10. And a 5.5 is probably being a little generous. So yeah, that's it for my WWE Bragging Rights 2010 pay-per-view review. Peace. My WWE Bragging Rights 2010 pay-per-view review. The pay-per-view just went off there. As what I gotta say for this pay-per-view is that it was pretty much an uneventful pay-per-view. It was pretty much a throwaway pay-per-view from WWE. Now, I wasn't expecting anything great from this, but I was expecting maybe if some other things or some things with this pay-per-view would have been a little better. Maybe it would have been an average pay-per-view, but that was at the best I was expecting from this pay-per-view. I wasn't expecting anything great. Pretty much a throwaway pay-per-view. And Texas were going to walk out with the World Heavyweight title because they did one thing where John Cena and David Otunga won the tag team titles, and then the Nexus got involved in the Buried Alive match, costing Undertaker that. And then in the main event, you were thinking possibly, Wade Barrett was going to walk out as champion, but then the main event ended in a disqualification, but it kind of at least made some sense and logic behind it, since the reasoning behind it was if Wade was part, even though the John Cena, the whole Nexus thing is another main focus on Raw, the main focus leading into this as far as the main booking and going into this pay-per-view was the 7-on-7 match, and that should have been the main event. Considering you did the DQ finish in the main event, not a good way to end the pay-per-view. But the first matchup was Dolph Ziggler versus Bryan. This is United States Champion versus Intercontinental Champion. And this was a pretty decent way to start the pay-per-view. Pretty much a weak pay-per-view, especially when you really only have two standout matches on this pay-per-view, which are the Raw versus SmackDown Elimination 7-on-7 match and Daniel Bryan versus Dolph Ziggler. And both of those matches were pretty solid. They were enjoyable for what they were, but neither one was anything great or anything that's going to be memorable. So it's pretty much a pay-per-view where no one's going to remember anything from it. They did do a pretty good job throughout the night where they made you think Wade Barrett and the next Barrett lost the match and didn't win the match, John Cena would be fired from WWE. And since John Cena came in there and hit the attitude adjustment on Wade Barrett won the match via disqualification. So it had logic to it. I just don't think it should have been a main event. If they were going to book that type of main event and book it that certain way, that shouldn't have been the main event. And I thought the 7-on-7 match, since that's been the main focus on Monday Night Raw for the most